I'm Chris Reddy. One of our new things in the show here is our introduction music. What are you guys thinking? Good addition?
Hard not to get excited, hard not to get worked up and ready to speak some truth after something like that.
Kind of to get you into the mood, get you fired up a little bit, get started with some classic rock from AC/DC for our intro. So
I'm thunderstruck.
Excellent. Good call there, George. For a second week in a row, we have a full studio here. Myself, Chris Reddy, hosting with my co-hosts, Mike Desaulniers, Curtis Ehler, and special guest in-house in studio today, our 2nd Congressional District candidate, making a return to right now, George Austin. Welcome back to the show, George.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So let's start off talking to you for just a minute here, George. You got something exciting coming up next week. We have the Republican State Convention Friday and Saturday. Ooh. That's going to be at Mohegan Sun. Your convention, specifically for CT2, Congressional District, is going to be Friday night.
That's right.
Looking forward to the big hoopla and finally getting the party backing?
Yes, I am. But, it's going to be largely ceremonial.
Absolutely,
we are no longer contested. Mm-hmm. But it will be gratifying to see the culmination of all this work and blood, sweat, and tears turn into something official.
Yeah, because you got a solid start right out of the gate, very early this year. Back into last year, you were working hard, getting ready for all this.
That's right.
You've definitely put in the time for these few months through the beginning of 2026. You're a week away. When it comes to this convention and your opportunity to talk to really the whole state, it's going to be Eastern Connecticut, it's your district, but really to a lot of people in one room, can you give us a little preview as to what the message you're going to try and bring to this is?
It's time to get to work. Really, listen, I'm going to save the unity and the we must lock arms and the kumbaya. We'll leave that for either during or after the gubernatorial and the LG ballots are cast. We can save that for then, but for now, we need to realize that let me back up. Let's observe, and you'll pardon the pun, the elephant in the room, which is that very many people in our own movement, let alone outside, very many do not share high hopes for success for us, regardless of cycle, regardless of the White House, just because of the state. Just because of the state.
Yes.
So, whether that be me or you, or anyone at the top of the ticket. So, with that said, what I'm trying to convey is it's time for us to really get organized and really buckle down, and we need to cast aside any sense of any cynicism about trying to win these races. And instead of trying to say, we'll just do this now so we can set up something in the future, we need to really look at the sense of urgency, given that mishigas of nonsense that just happened in the Capitol, which you're going to touch on in a moment.
Yep.
So I won't go there, but we need to realize that there is a sense of urgency now. So instead of waiting for something down the road to happen because you're going to set something up, we need to just go all in now. Which starts with, for example, recognizing that nothing is going to go well for above me on the ticket or below me on the ticket. Nothing's going to go well for me if I don't help where I can elsewhere on the ticket, and vice versa.
Absolutely.
I mean, anecdotally, it is said that no governor can take the governor's mansion without there being the support of a congressional district up behind him. Because the last time we had a Republican governor, we had one, and in fact, maybe it was two, but I know at least there was one congressman on our side, and that was in this district. I think the fifth was either right before or right after, but anyways. And with that said, there's definitely we need to coordinate with our ground games with all the local candidates. For example, you and I have been speaking on that, and even further down, even down to the probate judge. We need to build a coalition. That's big. That's going to be my message. Getting back to my background in construction is building, so I love to try and work that in, as much as possible. Yep. So I really am going to be talking about building a coalition from the top to the bottom. I don't care if you're black, white, left, or right. We need to find a way forward that works for more than just a handful of ideologues in Hartford.
That's great. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I agree with you in.
Was that too much? Sorry about that.
No, you did good. Like for off the cuff me asking you to provide a message that you're going to bring to the convention next Friday, that was a great job. So
I think there's a gentleman in Pomfret who just cried a little bit, had some tears of joy.
Former guest of ours on this show,
Yes.
also.
Yes.
Yeah, probably. So one of the things that I want to kind of touch on also with what you said there is how we need to make sure that across the state of Connecticut, we are really trying to fill these ballots with candidates who are looking out for taxpayers and residents. And we see that there are a number of vacancies in state rep seats where they're unopposed. And fortunately here, in this district, we're very close to having a full complement of candidates to run and to make sure that these races, like you said, are supported top to bottom. So as we're moving forward and we're really now getting into election cycle, as you alluded to just a minute ago, Sydney DA was just yesterday, the final day of our session in Hartford, which means that now the work there is pretty much done. And all those people are going to get ready to go into their reelection cycle as incumbents, or candidates are going to really now step things up for the next few months as we're moving towards November 3rd. So one last question I'm going to ask you before we move on to talking about the budget here, George, if you don't mind.
Hit me.
To now know that you are uncontested and really your target is Joe Courtney, what can you say to the listeners that's going to set you apart as a candidate from our incumbent?
Well, that is not. That's a very loaded question. I mean, how much time do we have? Can we take a couple of segments for that? No, but really, there's a couple of ways of cracking that egg. But I think the most important thing to realize is, again, doesn't matter if you're younger than myself, or if you've been retired for 2 decades, again, black, white, left, right, I don't care. This state has been under one-party rule, unilaterally. There is no discussion about it, going on 20 years. As a matter of fact, it goes back before 2 decades.
Certainly.
The last domino to fall happens to be this congressional seat I'm going after. So with that said, that being a fact, an indisputable fact, we must observe, and we must really ask ourselves, we need to look in the mirror and ask ourselves, is this state in a better place, yes or no, as a result of that? And I think there's going to be a lot of people, I mean, obviously, on if you're on the right now, or if you're in the middle, that's going to be a really, you need to do some serious mental gymnastics to come out with to draw a conclusion of yes, that we are better off. We're not better off financially. We're not better off, I submit to you, we're not better off culturally, because there's an exodus of people leaving. And those who are coming in are seeking refuge from another place in New York City. On the whole, I mean, I know that there's exceptions and that's a generalization, but it is it's more than 50-50 in that case. So I think that what's going to set me apart is this. I'm not a member of the fraternity. And I know that there's a lot of, I'm an outsider, this and that, which is true, I am an outsider. But I'm more interested in getting things done. I am not interested in party line voting. I'll give you an example. Many would consider Thomas Massey to be a far-right lunatic, but he votes against Republicans 9% of the time. That number for Joe is under 1%. It is a decimal point of him voting against his own party. I submit to you that means that he is further on the left than Thomas Massey is on the right, if you look at it via that metric. And I vow to anyone listening, I vow to not be a rubber stamp for anyone. Other than myself.
Yep.
But no, and I'll give you an example. I would have had a hard time. I don't know because I wasn't in the room and I didn't have to make the decision, but I would have had a very hard time voting for the big beautiful bill, for one reason, cut and dried. It spends too much money. It added $2 trillion to the overall deficit, and that hurts. Who does that hurt the most? The lower income tax brackets, and incidentally, anyone younger than 24 probably. And you know what? I'm fighting for you too. Just because I'm Republican, just because I'm conservative, does not mean I'm not fighting for you. In fact, I submit to you, I may be fighting for you first and foremost. So that's what's going to set me apart, is my perspective from not having been involved in politics longer than I've been walking the earth, such as my opponent has.
Very good. And people in Eastern Connecticut will definitely have an opportunity to see you over the next few months because you've been making your presence known. You've been many places since the beginning of the year out here in Eastern Connecticut, and especially in this quiet corner. So make sure that if you have any questions for George, you go to an event coming up. You'll be here for some third Thursdays.
I'll be here every third Thursday. We will be here every third Thursday. Yep. We're going to be here for the Boombox Parade, and it's not going to be just for photo ops. And you know what? There's, as a matter of fact, this afternoon, if I'm not mistaken, and I may be mistaken because I just got this information on the way in, that there is a large gathering here in town for the National Day of Prayer at 5:30 this afternoon, so a little over 2 hours, 2 hours from now. So it's not just to take pictures with people. I mean, I want to, but I want to have meaningful discussions because I can't live everywhere. There's a big district. I haven't been at this very long. I'm a first-time candidate, so I want to hear from you. I want to hear. I want to have these discussions. I want to listen. I want to listen more than I want to talk, and you wouldn't get that from this conversation right now since I keep flapping my jaw. But really, I do. On the street, if you see me on the street, I'm impossible to miss. I'm a big dude. I'm pretty dark. I'm pretty easy to find. So if you see me, grab me. That's what I'm out there to do. Please.
Excellent. So we're going to start to talk about some of the things that are related to our state legislative issues that tie right into some of our local issues here with our two co-hosts, Mike and Curtis. One of the big things that came out of our budget that was passed through the last couple of days of the session, it actually went through pretty quickly, and then there was some more bills that were raised after that. But as I previewed on Monday, it first made it through the House, 127 to 21 vote, pretty much long party lines with a few exceptions there. And then in the Senate, 30 to 6. Again, very similar. What I think that we really tried to make a point of on Monday was to be very careful about where this money has come from, where this money is going to go to and be utilized for. And there was a concern that was taken care of with an amendment late last night in Hartford. We'll talk about that in just 1 second. But what the messaging that we're going to hear from the other side is going to be, we funded education. We provided $100 million to municipalities to help offset high property taxes, which affordability has been the big concern that everybody's been voicing for the past year, as we've been talking here on the show a lot about. Really, when you look at a budget that went from pretty consistently the past 2 years around $22 billion, a jump of more than 8% increase in spending to more than $28 billion this time, it's hard to say that we really did anything for affordability here. There's a couple little crumbs that are tossed in there. I mentioned some of these the other day. The available tax credit for school supplies has pretty much tripled, went from $100 to $300. There's tax incentives for home caregivers. Okay? Some good things there. But real relief for the average person, are we going to see any of this? Now, what I was going to bring up...
No.
Thank you. We appreciate you piping in there, George, real quick.
No, you won't.
Yeah, and I'm going to agree with that. I'm going to say that there is not going to be any relief, especially when you consider that all of the ARPA funding from that COVID era is going to be running out in 2026. That's the end of it. We are going to be at that fiscal cliff. We're going to be at that precipice. We're looking at probably $1 billion or more deficit that we're going to be put into once that isn't there. And this really is just crumbs that are being handed out to us. And we're going to end up in a bad situation since really the shell game that I alluded to on Monday that they're doing by switching money around and changing the cap on volatility that allowed for them to kind of stretch the fiscal guardrails really is going to put us in a precarious situation in the future here. Now, what Curtis and I and Mike joined in the conversation just before the show started was about the money that will be coming to towns in not only some potentially recurring funding that is similar to the ECS grant and is supposed to subsidize that, but then also this one-time municipal grant that's going to be about $100 million. Do you want to talk a little bit about what we discussed right before the show there, Curtis, with regard to that locally?
Well, there was a messy road to the state getting this municipal aid and education aid, these additional funds down to the towns. Came right down to the wire last night in the state legislature, if I'm not wrong, about 9:30 p.m. last night, doing some fixes in the language on the municipal aid and the education aid, the additional funds. There was a lot of uproar. The Connecticut Council of Municipalities was sending out email blasts, warning towns that had already passed their budgets or had set their budgets and set them to referendum about the language in the bill as passed not being adequate to being able to reduce property taxes, offset existing past spending in the upcoming budget year. Based on the language that originally presented itself in those bills.
I have that language right here. Actually, do you want to hear what?
Yeah, please.
This is the original. Was that this $100 million in one-time municipal aid package under SB 1, specifically one section said that such grants shall not be used to supplant local funding for educational purposes. Under subsection B there, it said such grant shall not be considered part of the budgeted appropriation for education for the town for purposes of calculating the minimum budget requirement for the town pursuant to section 10-62 of the Connecticut General Statutes. That was what was amended so that there could be some relief in this municipal aid package.
The problem is that the language that got passed last night at 9:30, it's not a clean cut and dry process.
Correct.
There's some real legalese in that, and whenever anything gets passed 2.5 hours before the legislative session deadline, there's going to be some reinterpretations. There's going to be some errors made. We see that a lot in our one-party state legislature lately, the last few years.
Some skullduggery.
Yeah, we call it
Rats.
Skullduggery. I like that.
Skullduggery.
So what we're going to see, Chris, is we're going to see people going around and declaring victory, saying, "Oh, we fixed it. This money can be used to lower property taxes." And I'm encouraging everybody to hold on because we need to talk about what actually happens when funding becomes law in the state of Connecticut. The legislature goes and passes it. That just happened last night at 9:30. The governor then has got to review it. His office has got to review it and got to sign it. Then it goes over to the real government, the administrators. Yep. It goes on to OPM.
Yep.
OPM gets to look this over, and then they get to interpret, and their word is law until the Supreme Court of our state says otherwise about how that money can be spent. And because of the legalese that we see in the amendments that were passed last night on this municipal funding, we are not going to know for some time exactly how this money can be spent,
Right.
how that money can be used to offset property taxes. There are going to be all kinds of people going around our small towns giving spin, saying it's all in the bag, it's all good, we're going to take care of you. Do not believe them until the governor signs them, until OPM offers their guidance. And when we're talking about $270, $280 million. If you don't think any special interests are going to have their lawyers come and ask for a little reinterpretation on how we spend that money, you're nuts. So we all need to take a breath. I highly encourage towns to go ahead and wait before setting their budgets to referendum. Certainly, if you're a voter, before passing those budgets, until we know how that money can be best integrated into the budgets.
Well,
no reason to rush this. Fiscal year doesn't start for months. There's mechanisms to continue baseline funding if we need additional time. We just did it last year. It's a smooth process. There's no interruption in the continuity of your services. We need to take our time, get this right, understand how this municipal aid can be spent, how it can be integrated into the budgets, how it can provide relief to the taxpayers.
I mean, when you look at that in that respect, a few weeks back, when this referendum was being set, you had sat on the Board of Finance and asked them to wait because pushing it off a couple of weeks wouldn't hurt. We'd wait till the state got out and go from there. On my end of it, I sit on the town council with the 21% increase this year in spending. With the thought of the new this new money, I've already heard wish lists.
That's
and
right.
What are we going to spend it on, and what are we going to add? I haven't heard about relief. I've heard additional spending, and it's like I feel like I'm with my children at Disneyland, and we're just going to everything we see we're just going to buy now because we just got this influx of money. It shouldn't be that way.
I appreciate you giving me a little bit of credit, but I don't want to take the credit for sitting on the Board of Finance, and not just myself, Chuck and I, both the Republicans. And this isn't a partisan issue. This is just a common sense issue. As a town, we're talking about the town of Windham right now. As a town, over 40% of our revenues as a town come from one source, and that's the state of Connecticut. They're our big daddy. Wow. It makes absolutely no sense to write a budget, set a budget, send a budget to referendum until the state legislative session is over and we know what our take is. It makes absolutely no sense. We should do this as a matter of course every year because when we've seen all kinds of issues. It was just 2 years ago that we had major problems with car taxes because of our taxing district system. What our take was on that. We see it year after year, time after time. This should just be a matter of course. So thank you for giving me credit, but I just think it should be common sense. Chuck and I thought back in February that we just had head nods across the room, and the Board of Finance said, "Oh yeah, of course we're going to wait."
I thought,
and we got steamrolled in April. Yeah. We didn't even have statements prepared because we had sat down in a prior meeting, and there's consensus across the room. Right. Nobody disagreed. Common sense.
A lot of gamesmanship was played at the the last meeting. I mean, it was pretty bad.
For knowing a lot of these people, this is a small town. For knowing a lot of these people personally, it's hard not to get offended when you get burned like that. But I'm gonna go ahead and move on. We're all neighbors. We're all friends. I can't say what happened in the Democratic Town Committee caucus, why they thought that was a bright idea, but we are where we are. I am calling on people when we come to vote on our referendum here in town on Tuesday. I'm asking people to vote no on everything on that ballot. Send it back to the Board of Finance until we know exactly how this state revenue, these new revenues can be spent. Please vote no next Tuesday, May 12th.
All right, we're coming to the bottom of the hour here. We're going to be taking our break in just 1 second. I just want to remind all of our listeners, if you want to ever tune into any of our previous episodes of Right Now or Mike's show Unfiltered on Mondays from 3 to 4, you can go to WILI.com, go to the podcasts, scroll all the way down. You'll see both of our shows there. You can listen in podcast format. You can also go to YouTube and search WILI. And Right Now, you can watch our in-studio video recording of these episodes on YouTube. And then you can also tune in to Spectrum Public Access Channel 192 on Tuesdays at 6:30 p.m., Saturdays at 7 p.m., and you can see the previous week's episodes. This has been our first segment of Right Now here on 95.3 FM, 1400 AM, WILI. Welcome back to Right Now, May 7th episode. I'm Chris Reddy. In studio, I have my co-hosts, Mike Desaulniers, Curtis Ehler. We were talking during the first segment with our special guest, George Austin, about his campaign for the 2nd Congressional District of Eastern Connecticut. And we also talked about the state budget that was just passed, actually at the end of last week in Hartford. Describing a couple of things about that on Monday, I made reference to how we have to be very careful in looking at this because there was some effect of a shell game and money going on in order to not only meet the I'm going to say fiscal guardrails that have been in place as spending caps since 2017, but also in removing some very large amounts from the formal budgetary process through changes in laws that we'll describe in just a couple of minutes. But what that does, again, is it takes spending involved with those and revenue that comes in based on these, because they are healthcare related, outside of the formal budgeting process and outside of, again, those voted on fiscal guardrails and spending caps that we've had in place for almost a decade now. What I want people to be aware of, and I mentioned this again on Monday, excuse me, it's that there was a change in the laws regarding the spending related to volatility caps with the state of Connecticut. And specifically, the volatility refers to a very unpredictable revenue that the state might have in a given fiscal year based on circumstances such as an extremely wealthy resident of Connecticut passing away and estate taxes, property taxes. There's a portion that goes to the state of Connecticut, and in some instances that could be tens of millions of dollars that all of a sudden go in. Pass-through tax entities are another form of a volatility tax that they use to add in as part of the budget, but it's meant to be kept separate. And when we reach this volatility cap, any money above that in a given fiscal year is supposed to go back into the fund that pays down the state pension debt, right, which is something that we've talked about on previous episodes, is a direct impact on the affordability in Connecticut, a driver significantly in the overall pension debt that as a state we hold. And when you look at the three biggest factors being our long-term liability from pension debt, our debt that we have issued through bonds with the state, and then also taking into consideration future healthcare liability for state employees that we've promised them for years since they've retired, you're looking at a population of about 3.5 million people being responsible for about $76.7 billion in debt. When we're taking these chances by extending volatility caps, and what they did was that they actually changed the law so that the 2026 volatility cap looked at revenue from 2014 to 2016 and compared it to that in 2026. If we had a sudden downturn in this revenue that's considered volatile, that could put us into a serious predicament, especially when we're looking at a potential fiscal cliff that we could be facing in 2026, as we mentioned in the first segment, with ARPA funds being cut off now from COVID-era money federally, to the tune of $1 billion, where we could really be putting ourselves in a situation where property taxes are going to have to show a sharp increase, because we're going to have certain minimum funding that we're going to have to be, because that's mandated by the state of Connecticut. Already we saw what they're saying is a balanced budget, technically $600,000 under an extended spending cap that they legislated this session, but still equates to about an 8% increase in spending. None of that shows any signs of true changes moving forward for real affordability. These very much, between the way that they are shuffling money around to avoid caps, and then also taking into consideration the amount of money, because remember, there was a promise a few months ago from the governor saying that there was going to be a rebate check coming to everybody in the form of a couple of $100, conveniently a few weeks before early voting starts. In October it was expected, and now we see that there's a complaint. Two major complaints over the past few months during this legislative cycle were that the Appropriations Committee did not fully fund ECS again for, 12, 13 years now, even to the rate of inflation. It hasn't been adjusted, which is a huge amount that would have greatly offset property taxes for the last decade. So with these two things combined, now we're seeing the legislature come out with about $180 million that is set aside to kind of subsidize that ECS grant and help out the schools and school budgets, and then $100 million in this single one-time municipal aid package. And I will say that they are looking at that extra money that will be supplemental to ECS. Does appear that it's going to be a recurring amount.
We hope, we pray.
Okay. But when we look at overall affordability and some of the biggest drivers in Connecticut, none of them are being addressed in this. There really isn't any substantial tax relief. And we are fortunate that there was a last-minute amendment, which you had mentioned, Curtis, in that first segment, that will help to show, even though it's kind of gray right now, it will help to be able to offset some municipal spending that is directly tied to property taxes and property tax increases that we've seen over the past few years. When we are now looking at a couple of other aspects, I'm going to take a step away from just the budgetary issues, but also looking at some of the other things that really could have impacted affordability in Connecticut, where I feel that the ball was dropped. One of them, and something that we've talked about a number of times here, has to do with our energy. And before I get into what happened in Connecticut, I want to tell you very quickly about a program in California that has been highlighted recently in news. It hasn't really been picked up by mainstream media because, again, it doesn't fit a very good narrative here. There is a solar array, and this was at the time something they thought was going to be very revolutionary. It was a very special solar array in that it consisted of a huge number of mirrors that were controlled by computers using software to optimally direct solar energy from this huge array to towers that were situated within the array, capturing that energy and converting that to electricity. This was called IVANPA, and it was IVANPAH. The unfortunate thing that I see here is that what we're starting to see with this specific program is well-intentioned green energy policy that not only cost way more than initially expected, the program never meets what really the program requirements needed in order to be cost effective, and also never lived up to the longevity that they were promised. And this is what I'm going to try and describe right now. This particular solar electric generating system in California, and this is on the Mojave Desert, extremely delicate ecosystem that takes thousands of years to even evolve slightly. They set aside 3,500 acres for 173,500 mirrors and several of these 450-foot tall towers that were the collectors. It cost over $2.2 billion now. It was commissioned February 13th of 2014.
Okay.
It barely lasted 11 years. Never met its energy expectations, was plagued with problems where it never met the requirements that it was supposed to be putting out. And in fact, for a significant portion of its time when it could not do that, it had to be supplemented by burning natural gas.
Oh, no.
Now we are 11 years later. The state taxpayers in California still owe about $800 million on the solar array, and we have 3,500 acres of junkyard in the middle of the desert.
Yeah, what are you going to do with all that junk?
Right. Again, green energy, absolutely well-intentioned. We want to move in that direction, but when these programs are failing this miserably, we have to look at the cost effectiveness at some point. And I want people to keep in mind that I also talked about this on a previous episode just a few weeks ago. March 27th of this year, the General Counsel for Eversource sent a letter to both Department of Energy and Environmental Protection and legislative leaders in Hartford saying that they could not enter into 3 planned solar arrays in Connecticut because the power purchase agreement for future energy costs was so high that even Eversource recognized what it would do to ratepayers' bills.
Oh, wow.
Even Eversource knows that electrical costs are too high in Connecticut. Hartford doesn't. We now have in Connecticut House Bill 5340, an act concerning renewable power generation. Its aim is to promote renewable energy access and affordability while ensuring consumer protections for vulnerable populations with a focus on environmental justice communities. What I see it saying is your public benefits charge is going to increase to help provide infrastructure improvements to a few cities in Connecticut.
Okay.
Right? When there are specific programs like this that are going to be adding to the public benefits charge, and this one they're estimating is going to be a cost of about $85 million added to the public benefits charge on this.
Okay, not small potatoes. Okay.
Right? When you now look at our super climate fund, that is literally going to add an estimated 33 cents per gallon to all gas, diesel, and home heating oil coming into the state of Connecticut, we are doing nothing for energy affordability. Right? At some point, and like I said, this actual House Bill 5340 is to replace some solar incentives. Some of the solar incentive programs were set to expire this year. That is part of what is going into this $85 million charge, is continuing some of those solar incentives. But I also previewed in a previous episode that in order to meet future green energy expectations in Connecticut, we need about 4 million more solar panels somewhere in the state. Again, House Bill 5340 is what I've described previously as layering of energy policy. When we don't have a real opportunity to look at the cost to benefit of some of these programs and be able to adjust them, we end up in these situations, and none of this is showing anything to improve both affordability from a cost of living standpoint in Connecticut, to an energy standpoint in this Connecticut, to even the fact that we're seeing health insurance costs going up significantly because of legislation that's being passed here. But to kind of focus on electricity for just a few minutes, I'd like you guys to kind of also talk about this a little bit and, kind of add to the conversation, because we've had a number of talks about this in the past, and when we really do not see a concerted effort to change the way that things are being done here from an energy policy standpoint, it makes it virtually impossible to try and provide any type of relief. I'll add a couple of things to this before, and I'll have you comment on them afterwards, that are a part of House Bill 5340. One thing that was added is that they reclassified portable solar panels, so ones that you would use, for instance, off-grid camping, or if you were in an RV and you would set it up. They've now listed those as appliances. By doing that, you are able to get a tax rebate, and also you are able to apply for programs through not only the federal government but the state government to purchase these.
Great.
Okay. They also changed it to allow people who are renters or people who live in apartments to set up these arrays on, for instance, the small deck of their apartment. So there are some things to try and increase access to green energy. One of the other things that this program does is this act is, again, to try and increase EV charging stations in Connecticut. And I've mentioned this before, where if you look at the concentration of EV vehicles in Connecticut, it is extremely disproportionate.
Okay.
And when we are equally paying for, as part of our public benefits charge, because the state doesn't want to debate this in the Capitol, they simply want to add it as a hidden tax to your bill. We end up paying for charging stations to be installed in Fairfield County, where the majority of these EVs are. And I've traveled down through there, and I love seeing the EV charging station at a gas station along the Merritt Parkway that's connected to a big diesel generator.
Oh yeah, of course, yeah.
Right. It's
Green
crazy.
energy at its finest, right?
Right.
I don't
right.
want to hear about plugging your electric vehicle into a diesel generator. I don't even want to hear anything about you supporting green energy until your car charges itself, because it's covered in solar arrays and can literally be charging while it's driving.
And this goes back to what you had just said. They don't want to argue it in Hartford. They don't want to present it as funding that's open and transparent to the public
In the budget, yeah.
If it was in the budget, even in our one-party state that we're dealing with currently, they just don't want it to see the light of day, because so much of it just truly for New England doesn't make sense.
Right.
Connecticut in particular, our electricity costs. When you look at the per mile costs of electricity charging your EV versus purchasing gasoline for a vehicle of the same class, it just doesn't make a lot of fiscal sense, especially when you add all of the subsidies that us Connecticut taxpayers are paying to support the infrastructure. When you factor that in and the cost of that, it's more of a religion than a science in terms of that kind of environmentalism, which is a shame, because most people who live in Connecticut live here because we love our environment, we love our climate.
Yeah.
I can drive 20 minutes and be on the beach. I can drive 40 minutes and be in the mountains, and every climate in between. I think a lot of people live in Connecticut, live in New England because they love the outdoors, they love the environment, and there's a lot of great things that you can do with real actual environmental policy backed by environmental science, not by some strange person's kind of religious views on what it means to be an environmentalist. Buy an EV. Solar panels in a part of the world that gets a fraction of the sun of California or Arizona. It just defies logic, which is why they're sticking it in the public benefits charge rather than having it be a discussion that happens in Hartford.
Yep.
I mean, you look at it. There's so many other ways to make much more electricity. A revamp of Millstone. The upfront cost may be a little bit, but look what it's going to do. What it's going to supply. On the way here today, I was just going through Plains Road. There's a house on Plains Road completely covered by shade. They are Sunrun is putting solar panels up on this house that's never going to get sun.
Yeah.
I mean, but it's all over the place. It really is. It's a big waste of money in a lot of sense.
Yeah, and you're starting to see a number of these solar companies across the country going out of business. And each year for the past few years, it has been exponentially increasing. That really is a concern, because I know from my own experience in talking to people who, let's say, 15 years ago got solar panels, or in that first generation that were really in that big push back then, that company's out of business. Nobody else wants to touch their solar panels for repairs, maintenance, upkeep, anything. Nope, you're going to have to start all over again.
That's right.
I mean, while it's up on your roof, it's aging. When there's a problem with it, what's going to happen? I never even thought of that.
What about disposal?
Yeah.
Well,
disposal of these products. I mean, Well,
we're going to end up paying Canada to be burying a whole bunch of stuff way up north.
And, speaking of Canada, I mean, that's what we're doing now. It's not the cleanest energy in the world, but it's orders of magnitude cleaner than some of our alternatives. Natural gas that we rely on for many of our power plants. It blows my mind when we're just a couple states away from Pennsylvania or Ohio, especially Ohio, which has had a shale boom like you wouldn't believe. We don't have the pipeline capacity, and we keep on getting fought by people that have more of an emotional view of environmentalism than a scientific view of environmentalism. That means that we're instead buying liquid natural gas from Canada to keep our power plants running. This is what I'm afraid about going into June, when Eversource is going to talk about our rates for the next 6 months. At that point, we're lucky as a nation that we have domestic oil, that we have domestic natural gas. But if we don't have the infrastructure to get it to our state in a way that's affordable, and then we're buying it on the international market, we're subject to energy price volatility like any other energy product, and it's going to be messy. No matter what promises are coming from Hartford about cutting the public benefits charge, it's going to be a mess.
It is specifically New York and Massachusetts that have prevented us from being able to do any increase in natural gas at all. I absolutely agree with what you're saying, and I think that there are a number of other options that, first, reclassifying other sources as renewable energy, such as nuclear, such as run-of-the-river hydroelectric.
Oh,
I think are
don't even get me started. Yeah,
important steps there. We don't need to create huge Hoover dams, but you can have small run-of-the-river hydroelectric that could easily generate power for 750 to 1,000 homes, and it would be something that would fit inside of a one-car garage type shed size structure and really have minimal impact on some of the rivers around here that we probably should look at, because many of the Class A dams in this area of Connecticut are sometimes 150 to 200 years old. Is it time for us to invest in something that truly provides 24-hour a day clean, reliable energy? And that's simply because of the classification that we have not been able to do that. So there are some things, I agree with you guys, that we can do to improve that. We have a few minutes left in our show. I just want to go through a couple of other things very quickly. As happens in every legislative session, when we get to Sine Die, the final day of the legislative session, there are a number of fruits that die on the vine. One of those is something that we've mentioned a couple of times recently, and I've joked about that, and that was Senate Bill 466. This was the vexatious requesters. And fortunately, that was one of the ones that was hanging there on the House, never got called. A number of bills happen like that, and the thing that we need to keep in mind is that just because it happened this session does not mean that that's the end of it. Many of these will be brought up immediately in the next session.
Absolutely.
And started all over again in January, unless we do something to change that, which is our opportunity in November with these elections. And speaking on elections, I want to provide a couple of events that are coming up this week, and then we'll do the end of our show here. Monday, May 11th, we have Senator Ryan Fazio will be at the Wyndham Country Club, the Fairways restaurant there, from 3:30 to 5. After that, he'll be at 85 Main in Putnam from 5:30 to 6:30. And then in Wellington at the Hilltop Restaurant from 7 to 8:30, there will be a Understanding Eversource in Connecticut Energy Policy with both Senator Jeff Gordon and Senator Ryan Fazio in Wellington on Monday. And then on May 13th, we have Apollo Pizza. There'll be a candidate meet and greet for myself, George Austin. 2 other state rep candidates will be there. For the meet and greet, we invite anybody who would like to come down and speak to the candidates to join us there. Again, I want to remind all of our listeners, if you want to go back and listen to any of our previous episodes, you can go to WILI.com, go to podcasts, look for Right Now or Mike's show, Unfiltered, which is on Mondays from 3 to 4. You can also go to YouTube, search WILI and Right Now. You can also go to Spectrum Public Access, Channel 192, Tuesdays at 6:30, Saturdays at 7 o'clock. You'll see the previous week's episodes. Right now, Chris Reddy, Mike Desaulniers, Curtis Ehler, signing off for Thursday, May 7th. We hope you guys have a great week, and we'll talk to you next Thursday.